kind of impossible to follow the cadence and enthusiasm of Hugh Hardy. And I love talking about art, so it is intimidating, though. Good afternoon, everyone. What a fantastic day this has been. New ways to consider growth and intelligent development in our city, and now a discussion that's so important to the vitality of the neighborhoods in which we live and work. The arts play a critical role in our communities and throughout our city. You know that, MAS knows that. As an art lover and president of the Public Art Fund, I know that, and best of all, New Yorkers know that. Arts organizations can serve as cultural beacons and neighborhood anchors. They provide sparks for redevelopment, investment, and sustainability. We must continue to attract, nurture, and support the cultural community. This leads to the vibrancy of our neighborhoods and for the livability of our city. In Brownsville, MAS is collaborating with the Brownsville Partnership and Community Solutions to explore the role of urban planning interventions and arts and culture activities and how they can and the role they play in creating positive change in one of New York's most challenged neighborhoods. We're here this afternoon to learn from community development and arts leaders who are thinking innovatively about how the arts have significant impact on their communities. Moderating today's discussion is not Jamie Bennett, as is listed in your program, because somehow, now that the government is open, he has to be in Washington and can't be working here. Just part of this confusion of this whole shutdown process. But have no despair. We are in the very good hands of Ann Coates, our very wonderful Vice President of Strategy and Community Engagement. And I want to welcome Ann and our wonderful panel, Sarah Calderon, Elvin Padilla, and Jonathan Hollander.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, panelists, for being here. Jamie Bennett, as you know, is not here, and I'm going to try to fill his shoes. We're going to miss his quick wit, but we'll give it a go. We have Elvin, Sarah, and Jonathan, and a little plug for tomorrow's summit. Come stay, and watch Battery Dance perform. Okay, this is going to be a little bit... This is going to be a little bit like speed dating, okay? We've asked each of you to answer 3 questions in 90 seconds. Describe your organization's neighborhood and community, your mission, your artistic mission, and your organization's physical space, and the partnerships and financial models that enable it. The theme here is broad brush. Breathe, it's okay. To give our audience, both here and online, the context. And then we're going to get into the questions. And I know you have a few slides. We're going to start with you, Elvin. Oh, you have it. I could wreak havoc. I better put this down.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. And thanks, Ann, for the introduction. I'm from the Tenderloin, San Francisco, actually originally from East New York, Brooklyn, so this is a nice homecoming for me. And in terms of organization, I work with the collaborative of nonprofit art and education groups, foundations, city government, to try to build a space. And so far as the answer to the question of the space that we have, we do not have a space, which is the whole reason for our undertaking, which I'll explain a little bit later. And was there any other questions? I forget.
Well, a little bit about the financial model.
The financial model is that we'll accept funding from any source possible. And I'll get into that a little bit more later as well.
Did you have slides that you want to show?
Oh, sure. Do that now?
Yeah, just
okay.
Advance them. You can sit. You'll see them there. Yes.
Okay. This explains geographically from a satellite photo. I don't know how many here are familiar with the Tenderloin, but real quickly, the Tenderloin is a very old community. It's largely dominated by a housing stock of single-room occupancy hotels that are protected by affordable housing covenants. Many very accomplished affordable housing developers there. All around the Tenderloin, a neighborhood which is very low income with pockets of extreme poverty, in fact. It's a real estate market that's some of the most expensive real estate in the United States, and a lot of wealth that's starting to migrate in, largely following tech, as tech is starting to migrate northward from Silicon Valley. This glamorous slide here is basically just something I wanted to show because I was asked basically how these projects work, and I can describe it more fully later. But the San Francisco Arts Commission and the Office of Economic Workforce Development of the City of San Francisco are collaborating in a request for proposal to help fund initiatives like the 950 Development Center for Art and Education. And lastly, more beautiful graphics here. This is an RFP for any folks in the audience that may be entertaining doing a facility project or how to support other groups that are doing a facility project. How do you do pre-development funding? How do you put money on the table to get groups started and get them out the gate so they can establish project feasibility?
Hi. So Casita Maria is located in the South Bronx. We were started in 1934 in East Harlem by two school teachers who noticed an influx of Puerto Rican youth who were not being served in the community. And we moved up to the South Bronx in 1960, and we have a 90,000 square foot building there, which I'll talk about in a second. The South Bronx, as many of you know, is one of the most underserved communities in the country. And we have very high marks at all of the wrong indicators. So we have the greatest percentage of youth with diabetes, youth with asthma, lowest income numbers, so we're really good at some horrible things. But we have a wonderful community. It's an immigrant community. We have mostly Puerto Rican and Dominican families, as well as a lot of Central and Latin American families. And then we have a large influx of new immigrants from Africa, mostly from West Africa. Our artistic vision, and I'm just showing some slides of some of the work that we do, but our artistic vision is to be a vital contributor to the South Bronx Renaissance by fostering a culturally and artistically vibrant community which supports youth for success. And underlying this vision is the core belief that in order to address poverty and ensure sustainable change in a community, we need to build communities and invest in youth. And we do this through a variety of in-school and after-school arts and education programs, as well as a theater space with free performances for the community and a gallery, as well as an artist in residence program and a company in residence. We partner with a group called Dancing in the Streets right now. Our building, just quickly, is a 90,000 square foot building that is a public-private partnership with the New York City Department of Education. When we moved up to the South Bronx in 1960, we bought a former synagogue. We then housed a new New York City public school many years ago, and when they needed to expand, we negotiated with the Department of Education to work with us to build a new building for us free of charge to Casita Maria. And in return, we would lease that space back to them for 99 years so that they could house a public school. That's it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Hollander. I'm a choreographer, and choreographers need space in order to work. And 38 years ago, I found a space that was 3,000 square feet in the financial district. And there you see us on Chase Manhattan Plaza. We're the product of being artists in an area that had no art. There were no theaters, no galleries, no art space in Lower Manhattan. And we had to invent our own way of reaching an audience and building a community. I was just starting out as a choreographer, and I really was formed by the area in which we found ourselves. And 38 years later, we have the Downtown Dance Festival, which is New York City's longest running public dance festival that Battery presents every year. Our studios in Tribeca, where we moved 8 years ago, 8 years after founding the company, serve 300 to 400 choreographers and dance companies per year with low-cost studio space. We work in 6 to 8 New York City public schools every year with arts education programs. We've become America's leading cultural ambassador in the field of dance. We've been working in 60 countries around the world. And we present the work of our new generation of choreographers every year in New York City. Our mission is artistic excellence and social relevance, and every day we try to think of new ways in reaching new audiences and using the art of dance as a vehicle to communicate with community and build community, whether it's here in New York City, in Lower Manhattan, or around the world.
Thank you. I appreciate the challenge of an elevator speech up here. Let's roll with the questions. In some ways, the concept of this session could also be why integration, arts integration, is good for development, period. Not just sustainable models for arts development. And while we'll get to that in a little bit when we talk more about your organization and the creation of place, one could say the hypothesis here is that with an intentional model of the confluence of place, program, facility, meaningful partnerships, serendipity, and of course good management, that all equals stronger neighborhoods and stronger arts organizations. So let's see how that holds. Okay, let's talk about place. I'd like to ask you each to focus on the intersection of your organization's art making, intersection with the arts, or what it will be, and the sense of place that you either are creating or have created. What has or will that do for the neighborhood in which you're working? And why is place important in this case? And then how does that contribute to your sustainability model? Elvin?
Well, the first thing to understand, and I'm not sure how many of you have been to the Tenderloin or mid-market San Francisco, is very difficult to describe. Let me try it since you're all New Yorkers here, I imagine. But so imagine if we're Time Warner Center right here, this brand new glossy development, and right across the street there is the toughest stretch of East New York or Brownsville, Brooklyn. And I'm talking about across the street. So the Tenderloin, again, with a very high concentration of low-income folks, community, with, again, pockets of extreme poverty, right up against some extraordinary wealth. So in terms of place, making, and the arts, the purpose of the 950 Center for Art and Education, which is to be part of a larger development that's going to be mixed use with housing and hotels, actually somewhat comparable to where we're sitting here. And I learned of the dynamics of mixed use development and financing because of my tenure with the related companies that built the Time Warner Center. And that's thanks to Jeannie Birch from MAS, who connected me with Related. Related built this thing, and they do a lot of affordable housing development throughout the country. And I learned of how to utilize low-income housing tax credits for the development of affordable housing space, and how you can use similar mechanisms for the development of a commercial space. In any event, insofar as the arts and the importance to the neighborhood, we're trying to address an issue of increased stratification and polarization, and avoid a situation where it's haves and have-nots, tech versus arts, us versus them. This particular site, and again, it's so difficult to explain and describe, is literally right in the middle of all of those very different, oftentimes conflicting demographics. So we believe that via the arts and programs like Jonathan and Sarah run, that there can be a place, a meeting place for all local residents and visitors, where the arts can serve effectively as a bridge and something that builds civic fabric, so it's not a polarized outcome.
Sarah?
Okay, I believe I maybe forgot the question, but so I can talk a little bit about place for us. You know, Casita Maria started in East Harlem, as I mentioned, and moved to the South Bronx, really following our constituents. So for us, the place where we are has always been about our community, and they have, you know, that is just one for us. And our programming has always reflected that. So everything that we do is really very much about the community. So one example is we created the South Bronx Culture Trail through a grant from the Rockefeller Cultural Innovation Fund and in partnership with our company in residence Dancing in the Streets. And the entire point of that project, which has driven all of our programming actually in the last 2 years, is to celebrate the community and the amazing work and amazing culture and the amazing arts that has come out of our community. The South Bronx, as many of you know, gave birth to hip hop as well as salsa. And many of the people that were influential in both of those movements went to Casita Maria as youth and are now some of our famous alumni that we've reached out to through the South Bronx Culture Trail. And the trail is both an actual and a virtual trail where we're marking sites, both architectural sites. So for example, the Duane Reade on the corner that used to be the Hunts Point Palace, that none of our youth know used to be there. So, highlighting that component, the architectural components, as well as, where Dave Valentine, who's an award-winning jazz musician, a Grammy award-winning jazz musician, grew up and lived and played the flute for the first time. So we've really been working on celebrating the community, both the past cultural work of the community members, as well as presently, and doing that all through this sort of trail project. So does that?
Jonathan?
I think of place as space, and so we made the Lower Manhattan parks and plazas and piers into dance stages. So that forced the choreographic and artistic vision of the company to move out from the sort of traditional black box enclosed feeling of dance that I had and thought that isn't what I want. I don't want to play to the same 100 people all the time. When I first moved to New York in the early 70s, there was an event. I tried to find it online to get more historical information about it, but I remember walking up Avenue of the Americas and the sort of canyon of skyscrapers, and on the porches and plazas along from maybe the upper 40s to the mid 50s, every porch or plaza in front of a building there was occupied by a contemporary or modern dance company. There wasn't any contemporary dance at that point. It was called modern dance. And the Avenue of the Americas was closed to traffic. And left and right, you could see all of these dance companies communing with the audience. And it was such an incredible, moving experience for me that dance could come out of the studio and out of a black box theater and into the public space. And then I had the opportunity to dance with Twyla Tharp in the middle of the lawn at Battery Park. And, people here probably know of Twyla as the choreographer for American Ballet Theater and Broadway, but she got her start bringing dance into public spaces, the steps at the Metropolitan Museum and other places that people wouldn't think of, Fort Tryon Park, and I think she finished up in the City Council chambers at City Hall. These experiences for me as a budding dancer in New York demonstrated that dance could be a very public instrument and could be shared with the public. And then forming a dance company in the financial district with no space that was purpose-built for dance, it made me think about people, space and people, and place and people. And the people that I was surrounded with were people who were in the financial services and all of the different businesses in Lower Manhattan. And the challenge was to figure out how to share the art with people in those towers and behind those walls, and how to get them to come out of the buildings and explore and share the dance form. And that's how the Downtown Dance Festival was born. So this concept of sharing and building community in unlikely places carried on, and when we formed a board of directors, and you're talking about sustainability and how you sustain a dance company, I realized that the area around me was full of talented people and people who could enjoy what I was bringing out into the public space and who wanted to help me do that. So I remember one day I thought, I should form a development committee because I don't know how to raise money. And I'm surrounded by money. How do I access some of it? So I founded the Downtown Development Committee. And we had meetings at the Siemens Bank for Savings on Wall Street, and it was rather easy to pluck people from banks and corporations around and insurance companies, law firms. What it demonstrated to me is that, you know, this person had studied dance in college and then became a lawyer, or this person was a subscriber to Lincoln Center and saw ballet. And then when they realized that there was dance right in their community at home, it just became a very natural thing for them to become supporters and part of the whole sort of pro bono fabric that has supported this dance company for 38 years.
Elvin, you've reached a certain percentage of financing for your project.
Well, that's a great question. So what I learned during my tenure with Related, again, about the tax credits, that there is a similar mechanism to underwrite the development of commercial space as there is for underwriting affordable housing on the residential side. It's not really well known, a little more difficult, cumbersome to use, but it offers 20% equity dollars right out the gate. So in the project that we're looking to build, and we're actually queued up now to build, about $40 million is our anticipated development budget. So right off the bat, $8 million will come from the new market tax credits. I mean, that's as of now that the federal government is back to work. We'll see what happens next week. And there are other kinds of subsidies that the city on a local level can help with them enormously, and they're in the process of trying to put together a special use district, which effectively is a rezoning that would result in the land costs that the master developer had to pay for the land being reduced, and that reduction gets passed through to the art space. So, you know, it's hard because we're making this up in San Francisco as we go along. The city has been really strong on the operating side in terms of the arts, but hasn't really had to put something together to help on the capital development side, and they're scrambling to do that now.
How central is or was the arts going to be to your argument in the financing?
Well, yeah, the arts in the beginning, this is before Twitter showed up down the block, the arts were considered the economic development driver that was going to resurrect, revitalize all of mid-market downtown San Francisco. Then Twitter showed, and this phenomenon happened, and it's still happening insofar as tech being the revitalizing agent. So the arts, you know, not to say that we're not at the table anymore, but it's definitely not as prominent so far as the argument for economic revitalization. But, you know, there's still so many powerful aspects in terms of benefits that the arts can bring in addition to economic development, particularly in light, again, of social issues, to make sure that this is a place where everyone can meet and get along.
Sure. Each of your organizations is deeply community-based and has arts education as a central focus, an explicit part of your missions. Why did you choose that? Sarah? Sarah, Jonathan, Elvin?
Well, I mean, Casita Maria was founded as an education organization years ago. And over the years, because of the community that we were in, the talented and cultural community that we were in, the arts seemed to make the most sense for us to engage with our community and specifically to engage with youth. So for us, education just was a natural component of what we do. It's also one of the biggest needs when you look at data for the South Bronx and for our community, specifically the Latino community. Education is what that community needs to sustain and to thrive. And so for us, it was a natural, you know, we wouldn't not do education.
Jonathan?
I feel the same way. We're dedicated to developing new audiences. We're dedicated to providing access to the arts. And as many of you know, there are a lot of schools in New York City where arts education is not present. I don't know whether you do know that there is a phenomenal tool that New York City has developed, the blueprints for teaching the arts. There's one for every art discipline. And a group of artists and arts educators and policymakers came together to create these gold-plated documents. But you cannot find, or at least I haven't found yet, a neighborhood in New York City where you could, as a parent, have your child go through elementary, middle, and high school and have those services available. So Battery Dance Company, every time there has been an economic downturn and the arts have been cut from school budgets, we've tried to fill the gap to whatever extent we could. And there are many other dance companies in New York City that are doing this type of work. And it's one of the most fulfilling things for our artists because we don't stand in front and demonstrate dance for school kids. We give school kids the tools to choreograph their own dances. And this was a transformative experience for us. It's called Dancing to Connect. And our teaching artists have renewed themselves and refreshed their love of the art form and their passion for dance by seeing what it has done for the lives of young kids.
Elvin, when I heard about the 950 project from our mutual friend in San Francisco, I thought it was a bold move to put arts education on the ground floor of a Tenderloin building, new development. Why did you choose that?
Well, a lot of the groups in the Tenderloin, there's some wonderful organizations that provide educational programming, have been there for a long time. They're all housed in kind of leftover abandoned storefronts. Mm-hmm. So, on the plus side, the space is affordable. On the negative side, it's always compromised insofar as what kind of programming you can do because it just doesn't accommodate that. So, in the Vietnamese Youth Development Center, Tenderloin Boys and Girls Club, the local Y, the Marillac Academy, we just wanted to build facilities that are permanently affordable, again, because of the financing or through the financing that would be suitable for the programming that they want to do. I just want to add one other note real quick on the financing thing. I'm discovering now at this stage in the development of this project that it's critical to check in on who's going to support the operations after we build this thing. And that there isn't, as I had assumed, necessarily everyone being on the same page insofar as considerations on capital campaign and financing and building stuff, and considerations on who's going to show up once it's built and you hand over the keys to the art groups. So we're being very careful to make sure and trying our best to navigate political dynamics and waters between various foundations and agencies so that everyone understands what we're building, who we're building it for, and that it will be sustainable. Because you don't want to do something out of good intentions that just winds up hurting people, so to speak.
Well, the capital budget is very different than the expense budget, that's for sure. And you're both nodding, so you agree with that.
Well, there's an irony here because a neighborhood arts organization called Dance New Amsterdam, DNA, that was purpose-built out of a city-owned building on Chambers Street and Broadway in my neighborhood, 6 dance studios, a studio theater, an exhibition space in a city-owned building. They turned in the keys today back to the landlord because after a number of years of struggle, they just could not get over the debt that had been accrued during the capital element of building out this space, and the rent and the overhead were just too high. And so they didn't do the work that you're doing so carefully, Elvin, in terms of they meaning the city and the organization and the LMDC that put together the funding for this didn't think 5-8 years ahead as to how this would sustain itself. I mean, it's really tragic.
And if we hadn't, the city pays for all of those expenses for us, and if they didn't, I often think, if we were one of the groups that had created a building but with no expense budget, we would have been in trouble at this point. But
that's going to have to be the last word.
And a good one.
But it's a good thing. There are many more conversations we can have about it. I thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.